I'll tell you what, I am always looking for an excuse to carry 45 ACP. I am a huge fan of the cartridge, and 45 Super specifically, which is basically just 45 ACP plus P+. And whenever I come across a new gun in 45, I am instantly interested and I want to try it out. It is just a fantastic caliber and round for round effectiveness. Pretty much nothing can touch the 45 Super. And I came across this little gun and I had to check it out. It is an extremely interesting little pocket pistol. It is the Springfield Armory XDS MOD 2. I believe it's a couple years old, but I've never come across it before. And it is a 3.3-inch barreled single stack pocket gun. And what makes these things specifically good for pocket carry is the fact that it has a beaver tail grip safety as well as the trigger safety. So this is especially important for people that are new to carrying, and there's a lot of new carriers, and I recently dated someone who is uncomfortable with carrying with a round in the chamber. Whether they have it in their pocket or it's in a holster, they still just get wigged out by the round in the chamber, and something like this gives you a peace of mind that regular striker fire guns don't have with this grip safety. While I'm not typically a fan of them, other than like 1911s have them, this one seems pretty easy to depress. It's got a very light spring, and the ergonomics of it don't seem to lend it to actuating when you don't want it to, or not actuating, I should say, when you don't want it to. So I actually don't mind it on this particular gun, and that's something that Springfield Armory goes across with their entire line. So they seem to feel that this beaver tail safety is a good thing and gives shooters a peace of mind. So, I mean, in that respect, it is kind of cool. We have very nice ergonomics. This is what kind of drew me to the gun at first. It's kind of P30-esque, the HK P30, and we have a similar stippling pattern, similar finger grooves, and you have a really nice high undercut. Look at that undercut. It's a very ergonomic little pistol for being 45, and more interestingly, a very long gripped 45. So this is a single stack gun, so it's very, very thin, but they actually elongated the grip, I would assume, for a better feel in the hand. I actually think that its length versus the width is a little bit off, and they could have made this a little bit wider, made it like a stack and a half, not rather than like a single stack, or basically a medium double stack gun, kind of like your P365 hanging out in the back right here. And this gun would have been more ergonomic because it would have filled your hand better. Whereas now you get a nice fill from here to here, but here to here is very thin, and your hand almost doesn't even come in contact with it right here. You get like a little hole because of the shape of the firearm. But other than that, it actually does feel really good in the hand for a little tiny gun. And then you get very high up on it. So the bore axis ends up being extremely low over your hand, which is very nice. Look at that. That's pretty fantastic. And I would attribute a lot of that to this undercut and a very nice beaver tail they have going on right here. So the features of this gun are pretty cool. When we get into the downsides of carrying 45 ACP, it's always just going to come down to capacity. And what you're doing is you're basically prioritizing round for round effectiveness versus the capacity. Because what we have going on over here is we have the hot kid on the block, and this is your P365. And when you place them on top of each other, you get actually very similarly sized guns. So you can see right there. The P365 has a really unique slant to the magazines and the bottom of the grip in general. So you'll notice that when you look at the length of the P365 against pretty much everything else has a flat end to the grip, whereas the P365 is slanted, and it continues on with their magazines as well. So when you put the magazine in the gun, you still have this very angular bottom to it. So when you put in the magazines for both the guns, you'll notice that these guns are almost the exact same size, but the 365 has this slant. So, I mean, the ultimate overall height is almost the exact same. You can see right there, it's literally to the same exact point in the bottom, but back here, there's a little extra room hanging out. So, that's a funny thing when you compare the size of the P365. But, that being said, with these two magazines, you only have 6 rounds in this one, and you have 12 in this one. So, you can see the 365 is significantly wider. So basically what you end up with is a lot of wasted potential when you get these single stack guns, because they don't need to be this thin. This gun is extremely thin when you look at the grips. We'll hold those back to back. You can see this one, the 45 ACP, is much thinner. But as we all know, the 365 is so concealable and so small. This is a teeny weeny gun. So that is one thing that these 45 ACP compacts need to catch up with, is the Hellcat and 365 market. But as far as for their time, a couple of years ago, this was pretty great, because these guns were only holding, the little 9mm were only holding 6 or 7 rounds, and this holds 6 rounds. So when you compare them apple for apples in 2020, this doesn't seem so hot. But when you go like this, that's when it can seem kind of hot. I mean, look at that. That is, on your left, a 45 Super Extreme Defender, and on the right, that is the 9mm Extreme Defender plus P+. These are both from Underwood. They use that, I believe it's Lee Extreme Defender bullet that's pretty fantastic, and I cannot recommend them enough. This one, I believe, is 90 grains, and this one is 120 grains, and it is going 1,600 feet per second. Now, out of these little short barrel guns, they won't exactly reach the box potential, but you can see the size difference and how one could be swayed that if you don't think you're going to need a bunch of rounds, this is a pretty compelling option. Round for round effectiveness, this is just going to dwarf the 9mm, and that's how that is concerned. But whether or not you need the extra effectiveness, you know, if something is dead, it doesn't need to be extra dead. So that's where the whole adage comes from, whether or not 45 is more effective. Clearly, round for round, it's going to be more effective. It's whether or not you need that more effectiveness. But I'm just a huge fan, and I like to opt for a more powerful cartridge when I can. And in this little tiny gun, that's pretty awesome. Let's go over some of the other features. We have an accessory rail right here, which actually does work with certain weapon lights. It works with, for instance, the Olight PL2 Mini. That will go right on right here. And it also works with Streamlight's TLR6. They make a version that will go on right here. That is a must, as you can see. I have it on all the guns that I will carry. This is the Streamlight TLR6 made for the P365. They just have a version that fits on this rail. And then I will get this thing milled out for either a Romeo Zero. Actually, there's a company that will mill it out for a Delta Point Pro. That optic is bigger than the gun itself, so I don't know if it's worth that, but definitely a Romeo Zero or a RMSC would definitely go on this thing really nice. It comes with these really nice Trijicon high-vis sights. These are very effective for iron sights. I'm not an iron sight guy, but these are pretty good iron sights for iron sights. Let's go over the trigger, because I find this specifically interesting. So you have your trigger safety going on right here. I have to hold it like this because I need to depress the grip safety to show you this. You have your little trigger bar safety going in right here. You have some take up, and then there's what is perceived to be as a wall, but this actually isn't a wall because this trigger has no clean break. You just keep pulling pressure, pulling pressure, pulling pressure, and it kind of stacks and jumps and then eventually just goes off randomly. And then your reset is going to be out a little bit, and then you're going to hear a nice click. You don't really feel it, but you hear a nice click, and then you're at that kind of fake wall again. And then continue to pull, it continues to move, it moves, and then eventually just goes off. So it's very much a double action trigger pull in this Springfield XDS, and nothing like a clean, fully cocked striker like on some beautiful striker guns. It is to the point where I believe that this was completely intentional, because Glock's triggers just suck, and I feel like they try to make them crisp, but they fail at it. This company, I mean, they obviously intentionally put this wall right here, but then it's a clear, not even close to anything crisp. It's just a bunch of mush until it breaks. So I don't know if that's a safety feature or if they just intentionally like this rolling break instead of a crisp break. I've heard some people do like that rolling break. What I have noticed is, let's see if I can do it with the trigger on the table. So pulling. I don't know if you noticed, but the sight didn't really move at all because of the break. Whereas sometimes on guns, that might happen. Let's see if I can do it with the 365 and the dot. So you hit a nice wall in the 365, pulling, and the 365 just has an amazing trigger, so it's almost not even fair. But sometimes on these guns, the brake will cause the front sight to move a little bit. And that's if the brake is very sharp and heavy. So you have like a crisp brake, but it's a heavy crisp brake. One gun that I had that was very famous for this was my FN 509 Tactical. That gun had an extremely heavy, like 7-pound trigger, but it was very crisp. But since you were pulling so much pressure, when it finally broke, you kind of like went like that a little bit. It was kind of funny. And everyone that shot it would notice it. It was a very difficult gun to shoot accurately. And with this rolling break, if you get used to it, I could see this gun being very accurate and efficient, even though the trigger, by what I would define it as, is pretty poor. But that is just my preference. I prefer a light, crisp break like we have on the 365. You have that little bit of take up, it's very little resistance up until there, and then a little bit more pressure, and you get a nice crisp break, and then you get this really short, really positive reset, and then you're right back to the wall, and then you get a crisp break again. Again, this gun is just a little before this time, and I think that guns are going to catch up, and I really hope that 45 ACPs catch up as far as just throwing like a little bit of extra rounds into the magazine and making them the like a 1.5 stack, or just basically a mild double stack, and getting this a little bit more thickness. I think that it will fill out the grip more and would overall be a better platform just with a little bit thicker grip. I think that overall they did an amazing job, and this is a very, very cool gun that you can pack a lot of power in a small package. So that's 7 rounds. And if you were in a state that limited your capacity to 10 rounds, and you had to choose between 10 rounds of 9mm, or, well, it would be 10 plus 1, so 11 rounds of 9mm versus 7 rounds of 45, I would choose this gun all day long over this gun, just because of the performance per round. And you can set them up very similarly with lights and optics. That is kind of a little overview of this very cool little pocket gun. And little spoiler alert, this company, Springfield Armory, is coming out with a full-size combat pistol that will, in my opinion, really bring 45 into the forefront as far as a new, effective, awesome, full-out combat pistol is concerned. It's going to be the new XDM Elite series, and it is going to be chambered with 13 plus 1 of 45 ACP. So it's an update to their current XDM series with a much better trigger, better ergonomics. It will be optics ready, and it has a magwell. It has all of those fancy, cool features that we're looking for these days in our awesome striker-fired guns, but in 45, and a lot of 45 at that. 14 rounds, pretty sweet. So we're definitely going to be picking that up ASAP. But for now, we have this fun little gun. Thanks for watching, guys. I highly recommend this thing if you are looking for a cool little 45. Kick ass. See you guys later.